everybody, Dan Shinder here, back for more with Mr. Jeff Berlin, who has a beautiful bass guitar in his hands. He's going to give us some intro music while I tell you what this is all about in case you missed the last episode, in case you missed the promos. But I'm going to talk to Jeff about his somewhat strong opinions about the bass education world. Jeff has a lot of experience with not just the bass guitar and being a musician, but also education. And he has, as we all do, a lot of opinions. And sometimes our opinions aren't that popular. Sometimes they are. So here's the deal. I'm going to ask Jeff some questions. You folks watching are welcome to chime in. You're welcome to give opposing opposition opinions or disagree, but we ask that be respectable. Don't be an ass. My wife says that's my job and no one can have it. Okay. For those of you who know Enja, you get that. And I'll preview questions or comments that you have in the chat. I'll get to as many as possible. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. So you can say your name will be there. You can say where you're watching from, whether you agree, disagree, and say why. Either way, we're welcome to ask questions. Now, relay them to Jeff, but I will kick it off by starting with, let's just go with this. I'm going to pick, Jeff, you've stirred up kind of the ire of many online people due to your criticisms. And these are criticisms, not to players in their playing, but in the world of bass education, as we've talked about. Why do you think that people dislike your views so much? Why are your views so unpopular, even though they're just your views and opinions? You know, sometimes there's no right or wrong. They're just the way we see things. And it seems like when you express the way you see things, you get a lot of shade thrown at you. What's up?
Well, to begin, I want to say thanks for doing this again.
Absolutely. Bass and drums. I mean, we're like cousins. So we thought it'd be great to do this on our platform. We have a lot of musicians that watch.
I think it's great. And I want to say I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I'll also add that the thoughts that I'll share today are my opinions based in my history. Based upon my opinions focus on one area only. It's only the area of being taught, and usually the area of being taught for money. So the things that I share, I know are not your opinions, not opinions of Drum Talk TV, not opinions of other people, but are mine. And I'll get into it in depth.
Okay.
And so with
and
that,
if I could just clarify too, these are opinions on the bass education world as it is now, when people are teaching and getting paid for it.
Yeah, I think that where a lot of people and I separate is, and I validate my view from comments that people make, which is generally when I'm on a gig, says the poster, or you're not counting how everybody plays differently, or there's many ways to learn how to play.
Right.
The area that I think is not being attended to is that as self-taught bass players, we all are sort of beholden to ourselves to learn how to play. Every bass player, every guitar player, people often mention Miles or mention Jimi Hendrix, etc. In one part of some of their lives, they were all self-taught. Everybody is self-taught. In the self-taught paradigm, there's nothing for me to share because people go about learning in the millions of varieties of ways that one pursues in their home or when they're jamming and playing.
Right.
There's another way to be taught how to play or learn how to play, and that is by exchanging cash to a school or teachers, or aim to follow the teachings of teachers, whereby what people might not consider is that the lessons they're getting is a product, and a product comes with standards of quality. In the bass world, there are no standards of quality, and I'll point to the absolute amount of lessons on, let's say, YouTube now. These are free,
Right.
or they're saying if you tune in, I'll give you lessons. Anybody with a video camera and with a little bit of a homemade curriculum feel entitled to teach. And it's gotten so widespread that, interestingly, bass players haven't separated the two categories: being self-taught, which does not require paying to be taught, and being taught, which requires paying for, but doesn't add the elements of self-taught bass playing. So essentially, people that, let's say, if you want to be like a self-taught guy, like a Hendrix, I'm trying to think of bass players that are self-taught, but Jamerson was a jazz bassist. Jocko studied arranging. McCartney is self-taught, but he got some insights. Yeah. That in the payment element, bass players, in my opinion, right up to the college level, are not being given the product that they paid to get. And that in that regard, in this narrow area of exchange of money for a service, bass players, many, maybe most, don't have enough of a music background to understand that while they feel good and everybody seems to be associating in a happy place and people jam and etc., people are not emerging from music schools well prepared, which I can get into, but I won't at this minute unless a question allows for it.
Sure.
That is why people on the internet tend to be very uncomfortable with my views, because I'm telling people, whether they like it or not, they're responsible for their own musical improvement, or if they're paying money, their teachers are responsible for teaching them the content of music. And the flaw, and I'll end this now.
That's okay.
The flaw in this view is many, if not most, bass teachers do not teach music or exclusively teach music. Certainly not categorically set up where one lesson goes to the next and one lesson.
Like a syllabus?
Like a sequential step-by-step plan to this and this, because bass players are way more focused on performance, which I have no interest in to comment. I have no negative views whatsoever about how people choose to perform. It's none of my business. Bass players that jam and bass players that enable, that take on their own responsibility, it's in their hands. And bass players that play, including the bass teachers that I criticize, they're excellent players. Their art isn't an issue for me. It's none of my business, but providing a service where if people ask me, I will share some thoughts that people are not emerging from these lessons prepared either for a career, which no bass teacher or school, in my opinion, should offer a student.
So, and I see a question. I'll bring that up in just a moment, Jack. Thank you. And it's Jack Black. I wonder if it's the Jack Black.
You're welcome, man. If it is, I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's a Jack Black who is still the Jack Black, which we'll get to in a moment. Yeah. So it sounds to me, just for clarity, maybe I'm helping the audience as well, for my own clarity as well, and edification, that performing, as you said, you have no opinion. It's more subjective, whereas your concern is more about the exchange of cash for lessons for a product, and people are maybe learning more about technique or certain styles or something, but less music. And that kind of speaks to the question I was going to ask. Jack is asking, and I'll put it up here on the screen. He's asking you to define music as in teach music. Is that more to like music theory versus technique, or how to play with a drummer or within a band, that it includes more of those things, but less about the academic side of music? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, if I understand the question, hi, Jack. Hi, Jack. If I said that 30 years ago, I'd have gone to jail getting off an airplane. Okay. Sorry. Jazz,
they didn't like that opinion either at 30,000 feet.
I agree. What I'm sharing is that there is little to nothing in the teaching of bass that requires you to relate to a drummer, requires you to prepare for performance. That if you look at how, go to sports. If one is taking instruction in tennis, just to get a thing. You're taught how to stand, how to move your feet, how to hit the ball. If people knew I liked boxing. In the gym, it's teaching how to throw the jab, how to do certain steps. There isn't the performance end of tennis, which is Wimbledon, or the performance end of boxing, which is Ali Frazier.
Yeah.
The loss, and I have to put it in these terms, is that bass players don't realize that these things don't belong in a music lesson. When everybody, and I mean certainly in America, I imagine maybe people from other countries are watching. In America, we all were taught how to read and write pretty much the same way. We were in first grade, second grade, third grade, and proceeded onward.
Right.
And we were all taught pretty much through the same approved methods of reading and writing. And later, as we academically learned, our creative abilities were stimulated by writing a book report or doing a review of whatever the reports we used to do. This was to take our ability and language to the next level, which is a common phrase in bass education. So I'm trying to answer you, Jack, here. So the answer is, if every bass player that ever paid to learn would go the route of the proven ways to play bass, in 1 year, practically nobody would be struggling with some of the elements of bass playing that people are struggling with for 10 years.
So are you saying, and Jack, I'll get to your other question in a moment. So are you saying that there are things missing from the curriculum that would solve that, or that there is no approved standardized curriculum like there seems to be for other instruments like piano, flute, things like that?
Well, piano, flute are classical instruments. They're standardized approaches. Bass education had the lamentable principle of becoming broad. And so, yeah, I'm saying that no matter what style one plays, a G is always a G. And
Right.
a minor is always a minor. And bass players, in a great sense, don't know these things. So how can one find creativity in the expressiveness of music if they might not know what the language of music is actually constructed of?
So
And
I have kind of my personal answer to that, and then I'm going to put Jack's other question. My personal answer to that isn't intended to be an argument, but it's part of that answer. I would think some people are out there thinking the same thing I might be right now to that, which I can't be that unique. And that is the fart around and find out. So for instance, I happen to have my 8-string mandolin here. I've never taken lessons, but I can play it, and I've explored. Up on the shelf, I've got a 10-string Brazilian guitar and a 6-string classical guitar. I'm certainly nowhere near as good as I am at drums, but I've like farted around and explored, and I feel, and same thing with piano. I haven't had formal lessons, but I feel like I can creatively express myself. So before I get to Jack's other question, part of my question is, asking this for everybody. If I wanted to learn bass and I wanted to play like, I'm not going to use you as an example because that might be too close and too easy for you to answer. But if I wanted to play like John Paul Jones, or if I wanted to play like Chris Squire, or if I wanted to play like one of the jazz greats, if I was taught their technique on how to emulate their style of playing without the things you're referring to, does it matter if I've learned what I set out to learn and was able to play quote unquote like them? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure, but I'll try to adjust to your thinking and say to you that if you want to play like John Paul Jones or who else did you mention?
Yeah, Chris Squire, or
Let's look at John Paul Jones and Chris Squire. How did they learn? And the greatest way to find out how to sound like them is to emulate how they did it. How did they do it? They were self-taught. You're a self-taught 8-string mandolin player. Bass players are self-taught. by listening to John Paul Jones or by listening to Chris Squire, and by being in the experience of using your ear, finding notes on the bass, which can be a bear, but music is not fun. I'll utterly disagree with the notion that music education is not meant to be fun. It is meant to be pursued. Now, I love music.
As an academic?
Well, certainly as an interest, because I love music so much that the pursuit of it and learning stuff, which I still do. I mean, I don't know if you guys can see this stuff, but I've got 3-4 months, laying out in front of me. The point being is that if you want to sound like these guys, you don't need to pay lessons to sound like anybody. And the reason why I support this contention is because they didn't. There are no, let's say, established bass players, for the most part. You'll always find an exception, who paid a school to be taught how to play somebody.
Oh, I agree with that, but I could certainly see someone seeking out a teacher, whether it's drums, guitar, or bass, who, I'm going to use the word, specializes in showing someone Steve Vai's technique, or Eddie Van Halen's technique, or Chris Squire's technique, how he got that tone, where he plucked the string with his pick, because he mostly used a pick, little things like that, how he set his intonation and action, what amp did he use for years to get that sound, little things like that. I could see someone not seeking out a school to teach them that, but a private player that's maybe their specialty. They teach, if you want to sound like Chris Squire or Tony Levin or so-and-so, that's my groove. I could teach you that. As opposed to bolstering, I could teach you everything you need to know about music theory so that you can be more creative and blah, 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 blah. I see those as two different things. And I see the thing I mentioned is certainly something someone might be interested in seeking out, to go play like that person for whatever reason, because it's their favorite player, or they're going to be in a tribute band that plays that artist's music or something like that, if that makes sense.
Well, people can choose to do anything. If one has a limited vision of bass and chooses to confine it to the creations of another bass player, two things will happen. Maybe you'll find some sort of cover band that covers them. And the second thing is you're going to cut yourself off from other music and other types of styles of music.
Right.
If people want to learn like Chris, it's a good example. The best way to learn like Chris Squire, or to learn to sound like whomever, is to listen to them and work on your amp sound and work on your bass playing. Because when people say that they seek out originality, which is a very hard thing to plan for, incidentally, the way to acquire it is by listening, developing by ear, and noticing, hey, I could go this way. When a teacher teaches you a Chris Squire approach, a bass student is principally done with any kind of development as a musician. It's over, because that's what these lessons do. They stop a bass player from going through the necessary gritty, bumpy, I think I said this last time too, gritty, bumpy path of sounding, forgive me, of sounding really badly. That we all bump and stink as musicians. We play poorly. Our tone is awful. It's part of the apprenticeship. And if people are of a character to understand that this will not last, and that there is an emerging that comes, you're going to do better. My issue in this particular broadcast, I guess, is to advise people that paying for these lessons is really going to limit you, because people put headphones on and figure out how to.
Right.
Now, the reason I know the line is because I learned it by ear when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that I know is learned by ear.
Yeah, me too. On drums, I get that.
Dear Prudence, anything that I
Yeah.
learned is with me for 50 years, 60 years,
Yeah.
because I wasn't taught the temporarily satisfying approach of learning a style by paying for a teacher. It's the end of development, or certainly an interruption to it.
Yeah.
And this is, by the way, harkens back to your original thing. Why do people really dislike my comments on the internet or when I make comments? Because I'm telling an entire community that what they believe works for them doesn't. It doesn't work in the long run, and it kind of a little bit works in the temporary.
And I think that while that could be correct, I think it could also be correct that it depends on their pursuit to a degree as well.
Everybody has the same pursuit.
I don't know about that.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Everybody wants to play what they hear or what they hear outside. That's basically
Gotcha.
it.
Okay, so that's what you mean by pursuit. Yeah.
Well,
and my contention was their pursuit might be just to play like Chris, and that's their enjoyment.
I'm not so sure that people are that limited in imagination.
Yeah.
And if they are, and after what I say, of course, you got to do what you think is right for you. But everybody has this. You know, they have a thing they teach at schools. We will help you reach your goals. Some may have seen this.
And I'll get to comments, folks. Please be patient. There's a bunch of comments I'll get to.
I'd love to hear it. I'll say this and then end it. Everybody has the same goals, without exception. If you bought a bass, you want to play the music in your head or the music that you heard, you know, on the radio or elsewhere. Everybody has the same interests in music. Now, where we
or create, or to learn how to create, be able to give you the tools.
That's what
to
we
be able
hear
to
in our heads. The creative thing that I hear comes from me.
Right.
And I also love Getty Lee, you know. Okay, let's go to questions.
Okay. Let's see. Let me find my mouse. There we go. It started to go after the cheese.
By the way, Jack, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. So let me just I'll blow through these, and then you can ask me to repeat any of them for you to address more directly, if that's okay. I want to make sure everyone gets their comments heard. And I'll
do a quick one. I won't do a long dissertation. Go ask me a question. Okay. I'll try to answer it quickly.
Okay. So like the first one, let's go back to Jack, because his comment was up first after the other one. It says, what doesn't belong in music lessons? He's Tim, it's not making sense.
Music belongs in music lessons. The notes, the harmony, the language of music that it is based on. The things that we study. The harmony of music. Everybody, no matter what their style is, plays a G chord somewhere. And people don't know what it is on the neck.
So that is what belongs in music, right?
I beg your pardon?
You're saying that is what belongs in music, but is often missing?
Well, yeah. I mean, the pure academic approach. I mean, look at every class. And then I'll end this. Look at every classical instrument in Western society. Literally, there are no exceptions. They all learn music based in the harmony and the function of the instrument. The bass doesn't do that because bass teachers have veered from this and students agree with it.
And therefore, as you've said, there's no standardized like curriculum or syllabus.
No, and that's a shame. I have one I have to share. I have a curriculum and a syllabus, but it's entirely based in notes, and people aren't interested in music. I'd love to try to find a way to change that. Okay, go ahead. Next.
Jack, thanks from YouTube. And Unexpected Duo is watching from Florida. MDB is watching from YouTube. And their question is, what would be identified as the top 5 things to teach to a bass player looking to be a jazz improviser?
Jazz is a broad term. It refers to different styles. The top 5 things, all right, for the sake
of that's a whole spectrum of a genre in itself, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, there's free jazz, there's standard, like jazz tunes, and
There's
everybody.
bebop. It goes way back to the 30s and 40s. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would say in a nutshell, learning resolution. Resolution is vital, and learning how to navigate through chords. I'll give an example. Here's, a blues. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Here's a B flat blues. Hear how you can hear the changes?
Sure.
The reason is because I'm identifying by root each chord, and then I'm using the proper scale and passing notes to go to the next chord. That's vital. And the next one is chord tones, which reflect the purest chord sound. Here's a solo. Should I do this, Dan?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a chord tone solo through the same chords. And I won't be playing any sort of, the passing tones.
Right.
It's going to be 1, 3, 5, and 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. And here's a solo on 1, 3, 5, 7s. Now, I didn't use anything but 1, 3, 5, 7. So for the jazz purpose, practice chord tones and resolve them. It's the great element of bass playing, and every student at every music school where the bass guitar is taught ought to be taught these principles.
So those are 3 biggies. That's cool. Thanks.
That helped. And I love Florida, by the way.
Awesome. And Jack has a note for me that says, but Dan, Jeff says one shouldn't pay to learn the things you just mentioned. I think I agree. Jeff should say that. And I think Jeff's contention is that someone can learn it on their own if they learn by ear. And some people don't have a great ear.
Everybody has the same opportunity to learn a rock tune or a blues tune by sitting down and hashing it out. And
yeah, but I don't think I've experienced seeing other musicians not having a good ear. That they literally need it written out for them. Like, I'm lucky. I have a great ear.
That's interesting, because writing out implies that they already had learned how to read music.
Some theory, at least, to be able to read notation, yes. But a lot of people, I know so many people that just can't learn by ear.
Oh, they can. I think that it's a strict dedication. And people that can learn how to read a note, which takes care of the practical end of music, can also put headphones on and take 2 weeks to learn a couple of bars of a song.
It's an applied skill, is what you're saying, as not so much as a gift, but anyone who doesn't have the gift could apply themselves and develop the skill, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm good in a way, because I'm going by everybody that I grew up with. I mean, there were kids, all over Long Island, and it wasn't that everybody was blessed with a golden ear. Everybody dedicated themselves and wanted to learn those songs and learn their instruments.
Yeah.
And what happens today is, I would say, people don't put themselves in a situation. It's like being on a desert island. People on a desert island, you notice those desert island movies, there's coconuts, but somehow the guy makes it through 4 years. And he does it by dint of effort. And bass players need to get into it if you love the instrument, and don't subscribe to somebody carrying or opening a door that we ought to be opening for ourselves. But it takes a little work. Yeah. And there's no way around it, period.
Here's a quick question from Kristen Olson Calhoun for both of us. I'll answer first. Watching from New York, are you guys going to the NAMM show? I'm not, but our correspondent, Ariana Stella, who is our VP of Sales for our marketing and advertising programs for Drum Talk TV, will be here. We'll be there. Look for her. I won't be there, though. You're not going to the NAMM show this year, are you, Jeff? Or are you? No? Okay. Next question is from 19 Cassidy 65. You'll never play like Chris Squire. Probably right. If you don't know a major chord from a minor chord or an eighth note from a 16th note, learn music before you move on. Well taken point. Back to MDB. MDB says,
I beg your pardon. I'm backing up. Was that a question? I'm not quite sure.
It's a statement saying you'll never play like Chris Squire if you don't know a major chord from a minor chord or an eighth note from a 16th note.
Well, being self-taught is a mimic experience.
Yeah, it's a process of emulation. Yeah.
If I may, you can learn how to play like Chris Squire and not know anything about a 16th.
Right, and not know what you're doing, but you're doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it is good to learn the music first. Like
that's what I encourage. If people are going to pay for a lesson, pay for what you're getting. It's a service-oriented thing. There's no checks and balances in bass education.
Yeah.
Other services, other colleges, other schools, other lessons, vocational schools.
Yeah, there's standards that have to be met, which makes it, quote unquote, an accredited school, therefore an accredited curriculum, therefore an accredited lesson or teacher.
Not accredited.
Yeah, and MD, yeah, go ahead. Okay, MDB says, I went to Music Tech in Minneapolis in 2001. Terry Burns is an amazing player. Let's say key of D major 35251. What stanky B scale could I play over all of it? Thanks in advance. Did that make sense?
No.
It's on the screen if you want to look at your other monitor.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I close it because of my camera thing. Hold on.
Yeah, that's okay. Jeff's going to look at his monitor so he can read that. And thanks for being patient, everybody else.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hold on. It's taking a second. Okay. I went to Music Tech, a B scale. Well, if I was playing in D major, I'd play a D major scale. If I was playing 3 minor or 6 minor or 2 minor or 5, I would play the chords and not play a scale to cover all the chords. Here's D major. Here's the minor. Here's the 7. What is that? 7 or 6? 6.
Yeah.
Here's the 2. Here's the 7. Okay, let me try this again. So I would play each chord. I would not play a scale over it. If you could represent each chord, you're going to become a better bass player. When one plays a scale covering several chords, it's not a meaningful way to play those chords. Play each chord, study them, practice them.
Cool. And MDB was saying regarding the question, what are the top 5 things maybe broad? He said, apologies. He or she, sorry, I don't know. MDB says, apologies. I know my question was pretty broad, just feeling stagnant lately. Let me go.
If you're stagnant, work on chord tones.
Okay. Oh, that's great advice.
And also take 2 chords. Take 2 chords, C major, F major. And then work on bass lines. And play bass lines like that. If you want a solo, and then play solos for 2 chords. Then do it on B flat 7 and E flat 7. You need that teacher who's going to teach you jazz harmony, and I promise you, you won't be stagnating at all.
Cool. I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
to a comment by Alejandro Castro watching on our YouTube channel. Says knowledge and learning more about music and your instrument will never make you a worse musician. Word. And Jack says, I've always wondered why so many great bassists have college teaching jobs and Jeff was never able to get one.
No, I'll answer that right now.
Okay. Well, I want to finish his question though. He says, "Is it these views or something else?" That's a legitimate question, Jack.
It's a great question, and the answer is it is these views.
Okay, that's legit.
Yeah.
The contrarian sometimes doesn't always get the job.
Well, I gotta share a thought, and it pertains to my own particular morals. It was hard for me. People ask why I'm not at Berkeley. It was hard for me to ignore approaches to bass education that I am convinced are not going to benefit the people that graduate. So had I kept my big mouth shut, I'd be there, teach a few guys that were interested in what I do, rather than having the entire bass class follow the principles that were going to make them all better, because they're not my principles. They come right out of, interestingly, classical teaching and my old Berkeley and Charlie Banakis and Richie Byrack and transcriptions. So it was a moral thing in a way that I just simply couldn't shut my big mouth and take notice that bass education has completely deviated from the narrow, specific regard of music and let people go out into the world and find a career. You can't get a career by being prepared for it, because most grads seemingly don't get. Can I read something?
Yeah, sure.
Can I? It's an interesting thing. I in case the question came up, I just want to share a thought about being prepared for a career. I completely disagree, and I don't think that it's worked out that way. I went online and I found that 77, it's called Monsters 2024 State of the Graduate Report, that they say 77% of students in music schools are concerned about job security. Now, here's where things get a little bit bumpy. And I'm reading what I took off of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't know how they researched it, and if people want to agree or not, it's up to people. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, now sit down for this one, my good friends, projects that employment for musicians and singers will grow 2% from 2023 to 2033, which is slower than the average for all occupations. You can't prepare a student for a career if the majority of the students don't get the career. Now, that says that only about 12% of developing artists are able to reach mid-level status. Now, a lot of guys began at mid-level status and went to music school. So let's say there's 1,000 bass students at the music school. I don't know what student body numbers are. According to the statistics, 120 bass students, mid-level students, will return to mid-level playing. I don't know what's going to happen to the remaining 800 and whatever it is. What's that? 1,000 minus 9, 880. Now, here's where it gets even worse. And it is worse because these are statistics of employment.
And then Jack Black has a comment about what you're reading.
I'd be very happy to hear from him. And it says only about 0.25 reach mainstream status. And that says that out of 1,000 bass students, 2 guys are going to make it. Now, these things are malleable.
Right.
But the music industry's changed. People that are established aren't getting gigs. I'm not sure how people feel they're going to walk out of school and get them, bass players. So these are statistics.
Yeah. So Jack Jack says, Jeff, that study talks about conservatories, not contemporary music schools like UM, Berkeley, etc.
then in that case, you should not regard these statistics, because in the sense of employment, people, bass players, guitar players, drummers, pianists are still seeking, I would say, in that competitive sense. And that if people feel that it only applies to conservatory, give me a second. I have a thought that,
Sure.
Okay. The nature of music school preparation ought to be music and not employment. Because even here, if people are studying in order to get a gig, a lot of people aren't going to get it. So if people associate, or Jack, if you feel that this statistic, you know about these statistics, doesn't apply to electric bass players that are supposed to provide a service. And the service is generally either stylistic, which they learn on their own. You don't learn it really in education, but you learn it by being in there and working your way up to where you get hired. What do you think about that? Go ahead.
So Jack is saying that you're comparing apples and oranges, and for people to do their homework. Is it apples and oranges to a degree? And what homework should they do to come to a reasonable conclusion about this? Whether you have the answer, go on to a whole different question.
Whole other one.
So we can get
know if people believe that the music industry. See, I had to give statistics of what I could find, because it was, people often say to me, "Well, how do you know people don't get gigs?" So I went looking. I'm not sure that they identified it as conservatory information. You may be right, and you may know. But I know that record companies are mostly gone. I know that clubs are mostly closed. I know that the tours are greatly limited.
Oh, way scaled back for so many reasons.
This industry is compromised at this particular time, which is why a lot of people are home recording and doing these things. So, Jack, you have a very good point. If it's apples and oranges, there's an association here, and people are just hearing this. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm telling people that there's certain statistics and certain prognosis for future results. So I appreciate you clarifying.
Yeah, let's switch gears to kind of empty out some more of Jeff's brain lobes. And that would be the question: if you were magically put in charge of at Berklee, their bass education department, what would you do different if you were to run that department?
Well,
in 10 words or less. Just kidding.
I would fire everybody that didn't teach music.
Would you do that, or teach them the way you think they should teach that accomplishes what you're asserting should be accomplished?
No, because it's a college. The nature of college is highest educational level. So if people, if there's a video on the Berklee channel stating what's going on at the school, and in the bass page,
Yeah.
And I couldn't find, because I was interested, but I didn't see a single reference to music itself. People essentially were discussing about the good vibe and the happy thing and putting.
What was it more about?
I beg your pardon?
What was it more about in the absence of about music?
Well, it was about how people are. Boy, you have to look at it. Okay. There isn't a reference to the melodic study of notes. There isn't a reference to the pursuit of music itself. If you go to look at, let's say, what's that school, Juilliard or Manhattan School, Loyola, the European conservatories, they don't sell education in that manner. It might be changing now, but in that there was no reference to music itself, and that we will teach you the content, get you to read, and I mean 100% of the bass students. So back to it, what would I do? I would ask people that did not teach music to leave, and here's what would happen. Half the student body would leave, but those that stayed would be educated beyond their wildest dreams. So I wouldn't get the numbers, let's say, that are presently.
Are there people that you would get to be teachers in the department that are at all on the same page of your assertions?
Jazz players usually are.
Because I was going to say, I find it hard to believe you could possibly be the only one that feels this way, maybe the only outspoken one. But I don't, I mean, right? There's got to be other players that could feel the same way, but maybe they don't want to say anything. They're afraid to say anything. A lot of people are afraid of what people are going to think about them.
I've already made clear that my interests are entirely for the people who intend to make a career or intend to pursue music in order to learn how to play it well. And that somebody's got to stand up for people and give insight that learning is as narrow as a straw. And I would invite people to think of any example that isn't like that.
Yeah. And that leads me actually to my next question.
Sure.
Is musical success defined by musical employment success? And I'll add to that actually, or is it defined by that person's pursuit and how fulfilled they are in their mind of what they're doing, as opposed to how much money they're making, or are they getting X mass studio sessions? Maybe that's not their goal, but how would you answer that as it relates to
I'm musically very successful because I can play whatever I want and provide a service in whatever I want. People have written how certain famous teachers, well, they're working and Jeff never works. I work, but it's neither here nor there. That the sign of a successful bass player, according to certain views, is if you're working. And I'll disagree, because work fluctuates, and that the sign of a successful musician is to be able to play music, because gigs come, gigs go. As I said, I don't think it's easy to prepare a guy for a career. I think it's way easier and more responsible to prepare a guy for a musical ability. So to answer your question, people say that if you don't work that much, you're not successful. And I thought that doesn't line up with my thinking, that people that are musically capable are successful in their musical capabilities. But that's how I see it. I mean, there's a lot of teachers in a lot of places that don't work. They teach.
Yeah.
So according to the overview, I guess, is that they're not successful because they're not playing. I might not agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I'm going to use myself as an example. I no longer, so for those who don't know, I've been playing drums 55 years. I started 10 years before I was born. Anyway, I've been playing 55 years. I tore up and down the Sunset Strip in the late 70s, early 80s to the mid 80s. I played at the 84 Olympics in Los Angeles. I did studio work. I taught. I wrote. I was in bands that did original music. I did music for commercials, music for short films. I produced other artists. I'm not doing any of that now, and I'm having more fun as a drummer than I've ever had before. And I don't play in a band anymore. Like my wife says, he doesn't play with other people anymore. He just plays with himself, because I just put on my favorite music and I play and I talk about it on Drum Talk TV on one of our shows, Dan's Almost Daily Vlog, or like in our monthly drumming challenges. This month is Phil Collins. I'll do some inspirational, well, they're meant to be example videos, hoping someone will say, I could play better than that. Great, submit a video, enter the contest. It's fun. So I'm no longer working as a paid drummer per se, but I feel extremely successful because I can play what comes to mind or what I want to emulate, and I'm having so much fun doing it. So I think we're on the same page as far as that goes. It's not always measured by how many jobs you're checking off on your call sheet or whatever.
Well, it's sort of an internet effort, I would say, to refute the things that I share. I mean, Jack did a good thing. He pointed out that the statistics pointed out toward
conservatories. Yeah.
Conservatories.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that differentiation, but he did, I guess. But at the same time, a conservatory or a music school or I mean, there's
independent teacher.
There's a commonality here somehow, and the industry is not that friendly to us. So, but I guess to say, I think that if people feel that success only comes from the work area, I would say there's a lot of people that can't be seen as successful if they're not working, but they might be wonderful players. I'm not sure that that overview has meaning, but it's usually used to point out where I have flaws in my views. So if Jeff's not working, well, clearly he can't have reason in the educational comments and criticisms that I offer. But that's the internet. It gives voice to everybody. And I would suggest that, I'm going to put it this way: if people cannot find flaw in the educational comments that I make, there's nothing to fight against. If all classical players learn the same way, which they really pretty much do. I mean, an oboist learns like any oboist anywhere on planet Earth, and throughout all of classical music. If the statistics and the whole process literally is without flaw, what are bass players working so hard because they're what are bass players working so hard not to agree to? I'm really kind of confused. It's almost like people are seeking ways to embrace mediocrity.
Maybe because it's easier. I don't know.
Well, this is where it gets a little touchy for me. I'm commenting about a whole bunch of people that have problems with me, but who have not shared where my views are flawed. Where is it flawed? And I'm inviting people, Jack, everybody. Where is it flawed that only teaching music is a bad idea or a negative to one's musical development?
And here's a caveat to that. We've got about
also do some more things before we go.
Yeah, we've got about 7 minutes to keep it under an hour, just so we can make sure we can get it on Instagram as well. And producer Steven's going to keep me on point for that. So Steve, do that. Just a couple quick comments, and I have one question that I almost hesitate to ask because we could do a whole show on it. So I'll ask you to just give a short comment on it, and maybe we'll do a part 3 and we'll start with that. But before I get to that question, I saw someone said, bear with me here, bear with me. Jokamon S, I'm watching on YouTube, says the bass, let me put it up here. The bass to learn music we listen to, reading would be needed in the pits, orchestral work. How important is reading today in the real world to make a living? I'll kind of throw in my 2 cents, and then Jeff, if you could give a short answer so we can move on. My 2 cents is, I think when you learn to read music, it helps you understand music more and what the other musicians are doing and what the song construction is, the piece of music, and you learn more about your instrument, I believe. Jeff, you want to give a 1-sentence answer to that as well?
Well, yeah, there's no downside to reading. It develops your technique. People talk about technique, flexibility, talk about,
You're speaking the language. You can understand the language like any other second or third language.
Well, it certainly helps. In bar 3, were you playing an A flat or an A? Because I have this chord. Okay, let's do that. And it's resolved. Reading music gives you an opportunity that many bass players will never have. So in the practical sense, it'll offer, I beg your pardon, it'll offer me to burp up my dinner. It'll offer you to achieve work that most people seemingly have no interest in achieving. The second thing is that it will give you liberty as a bass player, where your question also reflects the playing element.
Right.
Meaning everybody says, well, I'm playing in a gig and I'm playing with a drummer and I'm playing with this guy and I'm recording here, and we should get into metronomes next time, by the way.
We will. That was gonna be my question. We'll do that. But I want to add to this.
Wait. Let me just finish this.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll wrap it up because I know we got 4 minutes.
Okay.
That I forgot where it was. So where bass players are concerned about is flexibility and technique and playing. There's nothing better than playing music every day to learn how to ascend and descend the neck. That technique, the only other technique one may want is, let's say, a thumb for slapping, which is self-taught, or plucking certain things, which is self-taught. There's no downside to the learning of music. It'll make you play more expressively. It'll open up doors that people have not opened up.
Right. Well, and I think even in the most basic terms, the answer to that question, and it's a fair question. I hear this in drumming a lot. In the most basic terms, if you're doing a session and the same person says session work is almost non-existent, but
It's
let's say
almost non-existent.
let's say you're sharing files with fellow musicians around the world, across the country, and let's say they say, hey, Fred, we want to punch you in at bar 34, but change those first two notes down a step and a half. If you can't read music, you can't find that bar, and you don't know what a step and a half is in reference to what's on the staff right there. So I think in the most basic terms, it gives you concept of the context or context of the concept. Would that be fair to say?
I think that they wouldn't hire anybody that doesn't know how to read. So
if they're doing the project off of charts, absolutely. Because how would they, it'd be like saying read these Dead Sea Scrolls, but I don't know Aramaic or whatever. So how am I going to read it?
Here's a final little thought. Everybody wants to learn. And you know how I know? Because YouTube is constantly referred to. People are seeking ideas constantly on YouTube.
Right.
People go to Scott's bass lessons to check out whatever is being demonstrated and shown.
Right.
People, as you say, want to learn Chris Squire. They'll go to a teacher. People go to music schools. People go and play with people and have to learn repertoire. Everybody, maybe 100%, all want the same thing. You want to play what's in you or what you hear outside. Right. Everybody wants to learn. So to maybe wrap this up, I don't know how close we are, guaranteeing people that learning how to read from usually a jazz teacher or a teacher of music itself is going to be put a block in the puzzle that many people don't know how important it is because they haven't attempted it out. But last thought, it's freaking hard. Don't go with fun and entertaining and this and that. It ain't.
Right.
But I love bass so much. What's the problem? I'm not outside in the winter shoveling, and I'm not out tarring the street in the summer. I'm home with a bass, and it's a beautiful thing. And if everybody taught like this, my big mouth, it would be nothing for me to comment about.
Right. Jeff, thanks so much.
Like me in the oboe world, let's say. Okay. Right. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and thanks everybody so much. We're going to do this again. I'm going to make an announcement that two things. One, we're going to do a part 3 of this. And Jeff and I soon will be now announcing a new Drum Talk TV original series. It'll be our 5th series amongst our brand that's going to be all about the relationship between bass and drums. And just a plug for a couple things we have coming up for Drum Talk TV this Saturday for the members of our membership site, Drum Talk TV Brilliance. Steve will put that in the chat with the code. You can get a discount code. But we're going to have a fan Q&A with legendary music journalist and author Chris Welsh, who traveled with Led Zeppelin, ELP, wrote about John Bonham, Jimi Hendrix, Keith Emerson, many other books. He's going to do a fan Q&A this Saturday on the 18th, sorry, and Tuesday the 21st. You can check our calendar at the website that Steve's putting in the comments. We're having our twice a month music themed game show, and it's called What the Funk, because that's the music theme. 3 rounds, you can win prizes. It's gonna be great. Join us, have fun, and I'll send this link to Jeff on both YouTube and Facebook so he can go through additional comments from people that see it after we've been live. Thanks everybody, take care.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Jack. Thanks all you